Recognizing the potential of hydraulic drives, other researchers in this field joined Armstrong's work. Although hydraulic energy was ideally suited for linear motion in machines based on a combination of piston and cylinder, rotary hydraulic motors were also developed. With the introduction of high-pressure water hydraulic energy, the range of hydraulic machinery and equipment expanded rapidly. Alongside cranes and other lifting devices, pressurized water energy began to be applied in a wide variety of mechanisms. Furthermore, in factories, workshops, docks, shipyards, freight stations, and warehouses, these machines began to be integrated into local hydro-energy networks. The foundation of an individual enterprise's local hydraulic system was a power-generating station, which included a steam boiler, a high-pressure steam pump, and a water accumulator. From there, a system of high-pressure pipes transmitted hydraulic energy in the form of pressurized water to various consumers. If water supplies at the facility were limited, an additional return line for used water was arranged with the aim of its secondary utilization. In certain cases, such as when mains were laid over long distances, on the order of a mile or more, or when particularly high-power devices with short, intermittent operation cycles were connected to the network, additional accumulators and safety relief valves were incorporated into the system to protect against hydraulic shock. Several methods existed for creating the necessary water pressure in pipes to operate hydraulic equipment. The earliest and simplest method was waterhead from an elevated reservoir. Water was pumped by an engine into a tank located on a brick tower or at the top of a building. The tower acted as an accumulator, storing hydraulic energy and then evenly releasing it into the system at the required pressure. While not the first, a prominent and large-scale example of this solution was the water tower at the Great Grimsby Docks. Its construction was completed in 1852 for Armstrong's dock installations. At the top of this tower, a wrought iron reservoir with a capacity of about 36,000 gallons was installed, elevated roughly 200 feet above ground level. This height provided a stable water pressure of about 85 pounds per square inch. This head of pressure was sufficient to drive the mechanisms of lock gates, dry docks, and 15 quayside cranes, as well as to supply fresh water to ships and residential houses within the dock area. Water was pumped into the tower by a 25-horsepower steam-driven double-piston pump. About 1 million bricks were used in the construction of the structure, making the monumental tower visible for many miles around, far inland. It reliably supplied the docks until 1892 and has survived to the present day, though it was nearly demolished during World War II because its massive size served as a convenient landmark beacon for Nazi Luftwaffe bombers. Bulky water towers were expensive to build, and furthermore, they could not be erected just anywhere. For instance, poor soil conditions prevented the construction of a tall accumulator tower in New Holland, adjacent to Grimsby. Therefore, other methods were implemented: weighted load accumulators and hydropneumatic accumulators. Weighted accumulators, referred to simply as accumulators, were used more frequently than any other system. They were employed to maintain pressure in hydraulic mains from 400 to 750 pounds per square inch and higher. Such pressure was considered high, while working pressure below 150 pounds per square inch was classified as low. This system was developed by the same Lord Armstrong in 1850. The accumulator was installed on the New Holland Pier and effectively put into operation more than a year before the tower system in Grimsby. The working pressure of this setup was 800 pounds per square inch. Subsequently, weighted hydraulic accumulators acquired numerous forms and design features. The accumulator consisted of a long, stationary cylinder with a vertical plunger inside. The upper part of the plunger carried a cast-iron cage loaded with iron, stone, or other material, weighing an amount that depended on the system's calculated working pressure. The accumulator was located next to the pump engine in the pressure pipeline. Water from the pumps was forced into the cylinder, causing the piston to rise against the resistance of the load, thereby creating the necessary pressure in the mains. The volume of the accumulator cylinder was calculated in accordance with the number of cranes, hoists, and other equipment that needed to be operated. For example, an accumulator with a cylinder diameter of 18 inches and a plunger stroke of 20 to 22 feet held from 260 to 290 gallons of water. Water was supplied to it by a pump with a capacity of about 130 gallons of water per minute at a working pressure of 750 pounds per square inch, driven by a steam engine of about 75 horsepower. At a nominal system pressure of around 750 pounds per square inch for this piston size, the weight of the ballast material was typically about 100 tons. The power of a single such installation was sufficient to service the entire complex of port equipment, consisting of approximately 30 units of machinery, including 15 cranes with a lifting capacity of 1.5 tons each, 1 or 2 heavy cranes with a lifting capacity of 3 tons each, and the remainder comprising mechanisms for driving winches, lock gates, and the like. Real examples of accumulators of this type have survived and can be seen in historical locations in England. One of them can be seen in the engine house of the Bristol Harbour hydraulic system. The original accumulator from 1887, which provided a pressure of 750 pounds per square inch, is installed inside the tower, while what is visible on the outside is an additional external accumulator added in 1954, as this hydraulic system operated continuously until 2010. Also, nowadays you can see similar hydraulic accumulators that were used in the original operating mechanism of Tower Bridge in London. The next stage in the use of high-pressure water energy was the transition from local private networks to citywide centralized hydraulic power systems. In the mid-19th century, the use of steam to produce mechanical energy reached its peak. At the same time, petroleum was relatively unknown, and the development of gas engines was still on the horizon, just like experiments with electricity, which were opening up new possibilities, though industrial use of electrical power remained a distant future. Smoke and smog produced by hundreds of small steam boilers began to suffocate major cities. A specific solution to air pollution for many large cities, such as London, was seen in the development of centralized hydro-energy networks that supplied high-pressure water, which was distributed throughout the city to power cranes, elevators, and other equipment. This became a cleaner and more compact alternative to the smoking steam engines of numerous manufacturing enterprises. The first public commercial hydraulic system was the English city of Hull, where it began operating in 1876. About 2.5 miles of cast-iron pressure pipelines with a diameter of 6 inches were laid under the city streets, to which consumers could connect to power their machinery. Convinced of the viability of this concept, engineers decided to implement such a project in other locations. For this purpose, the London Hydraulic Power Company was established in 1883. The organization laid an extensive network of hydraulic mains beneath the streets of London and later other cities. Through London's hydraulic network, pressurized water at a pressure of 750 pounds per square inch was supplied around the clock and year-round through approximately 180 miles of cast iron and steel pipes to hotels, shops, offices, apartment buildings, ports, and factories. Water was pumped into the system directly from the Thames, and its supply was carried out at a very moderate price. Thanks to this, many abandoned their bulky and expensive local systems, while at the same time the ranks of consumers were joined by those who previously could not use high-pressure water due to the high cost of individual equipment. The creation of a citywide hydraulic network contributed significantly to the expanded use of hydraulic machinery across all sectors of industry and urban public life. It was even used to supply fire hydrants. The scale of operations for the company controlling London's hydraulic power grew at a staggering pace. While in 1893, Roughly 6.5 million gallons of water were pumped through its mains weekly. By 1933, that figure averaged 32 million gallons a week. London's success spurred the growth of the industry across the UK and around the globe. Similar networks were constructed in Liverpool, Birmingham, Manchester, and Glasgow, as well as in Australia, specifically Melbourne and Sydney. Centralized systems of this kind also emerged in Antwerp, Buenos Aires, and Geneva. Having experienced a meteoric rise in the late 19th century, hydraulic power systems gradually went into decline by the mid-20th century. The advent of electricity sealed the fate of hydraulic networks. The operation in Hull was decommissioned in 1947, and the final London pumping station shut down in 1977. Today, through the former London hydraulic pipes, run modern fiber-optic communication cables. In the next episode of the Dinosaurs of the Industrial Era series, we will continue the story of 19th-century hydraulic cargo cranes, ranging from the smallest dock worker assistants to massive 160-ton port machines.